Welcome to this week's episode of Make It So, the Real Super Geeks Star Trek Picard AfterShow. That is a mouthful. I'm amazed I made it through without stumbling this week. I guess I'm getting in practice. Welcome, and let's start off with introducing our co-hosts this week, and then we'll dive deep into this episode, which was a pretty big one, I think you'll agree. We'll start off with our mascot, Index, or as we more lovingly know her, Sunseal. How are you, Sun?
Hi. Well, this was a lot of info. And finally, I didn't mind the kissy of the two on the board cube.
We definitely will be talking about that this week. Shawn O'Halloran in Las Vegas, Nevada. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I can't complain. Our producer, Justin. How are you, Justin?
Doing quite well.
Excellent. You look good. Sound good. I think you did something with your microphone because you sound quite exceptional this week. And finally, joining us as a now permanent part of Super Geeks is Travis Linton, who is one of the admins of the largest Star Trek Facebook group. So, how are you doing, Travis? And welcome.
Thank you. Aside from feeling maybe just a bit under the weather and dealing with a little drama over here, I'm doing exceptionally fine.
Good.
Don't drink the haterade!
Kitty's eating for a week, so I might have a cat jump on me. I have no idea yet.
That's been known to happen.
We seem to have that happen a lot on this show.
Well, let's dive in, shall we? And let's start with possibly the biggest sort of set piece in this episode, called The Impossible Box, episode 6 of Star Trek Picard's first season. We finally have the disparate storylines between Picard and the Motley Crew cross with what's going on the artifact or the reclaimed Borg cube. And they pack a lot in there, a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of bad memories for Picard, but also managed to move the overall plot for the season quite a bit forward in one episode. I guess let's start first with Soji, since she's sort of at the center of all of this. Then we'll move to Picard himself and some of his issues. So Soji in this one finally bumps up against what Narek describes as her cognitive dissonance between knowing she's not human and thinking she's a human, and that is his in getting through to her, getting the information that everyone's seeking from her, which is the location of the so-called nest of other synthetics or androids. And so in this episode, she freaks out when she discovers that all of her memories which are supposedly go back a lifetime, are only 37 months old. Everything, including her Flaughter storybook on a pad on her desk. Did you guys see that?
It was a lunchbox.
Oh, was it a lunchbox?
Yeah, it was a lunchbox. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's even better.
Yeah, I caught it.
I assumed it was a pad, but yeah, Flaughter, for those of you not familiar with Star Trek Voyager, was a kid's story that was featured in one of the episodes.
A couple episodes I think it was featured in. It's like the Flaughter and Treatise, yeah. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, people are going to complain about that because why do they need lunch boxes in the future? I was waiting for that complaint. That's like
what? People don't eat sandwiches in the future.
I mean, I saw every other complaint this week, so I mean, why not?
What was that, son?
So I said, wow, how do you can't get more stereotypical of an accent than that.
I've been watching a lot of Hunters this week, so I think it might have just crept in by osmosis. Yeah, Al
Pacino's Yiddish accent.
Yeah. So it's apparently, an earworm. Okay, so tell me what you think about what we learned about Soji, what we learned about Narek, and the trajectory they've taken. A lot of people have hated the whole slow-moving romance part of it, and that really kind comes to a head in this episode. How well do you think they managed that? And where do you think it goes from here? Let's start with Travis.
Oh, you just had to start with me, did you?
I did, because you're now officially part of this group, so your initiation is having to start first.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and agree with Son on one thing. I was finally very much invested in the plot revolving Narek and Soji. Beforehand, I just really wasn't feeling it. Like, I was interested to see where it went, but whenever they were on screen, I just didn't care. Here, I very much was like, okay, it's starting to pick up. I'm starting to get, more interested. I want one of those fucking toys that Narek has, and
Oh, that's cool.
The Impossible Box, yeah.
Yeah, the Impossible Box, or the what did he call it? The Tan Jikran, I think is what it.
Oh yeah,
said.
the actual Romulan name is not nearly as cool as calling it a Romulan Rubik's Cube.
It's not even a Rubik's Cube. It's more advanced than that.
Well, it'll
Rubik's
be out
Oh,
of
sure, of course. It's got a little Statue of Liberty that comes up out of it.
Right.
No,
what
it's
the hell
not
is?
even that. It literally has some kind
It's the Statue of Liberty.
It has
But
a
right.
mini,
Or radioactive gas, either one.
it has a mini transporter inside of it,
Well,
which dispenses the prize.
Well, don't worry about it, because next
Surprise! It's death.
If you want one, it will be on Etsy next week, no doubt. So just start searching, you'll find it.
I think the
If I
best part
start
was how
playing
much
one of
they.
these things, if I start
Go ahead
playing
and finish,
one of
Travis.
these things
Then.
on Etsy and it breaks in my hand, I'm going to cry. It's just how it is. Like, I'm a fidgeter. I have this thing in my hand all the time.
I know.
And
I think your fidget spinner needs to become an official part of the show. I have to tell you, I can't stop fixating on that thing. When you're twirling it around, I'm like,
It sounds like
what?
hypnotizing.
It is. It's hypnotizing. It's mesmerizing. Son, you were going to say something.
I was the most impressed I was with the box itself was how wooden it looked. Like it was different types of wood put together to make this cube. That's what impressed me the most about the box.
It was quite beautiful.
Yeah, I'm really okay with their relationship now. Like, holy crap!
Now that you know that it's
all
built
you
upon a bed of lies.
Well, we all knew that already. Jesus,
Right.
We already
of course.
knew it was built on a bed of lies.
Here's a quick poll. How many of you think that Narek actually is in love with her? Yeah or nay? Shawn? Yes.
I do.
Travis? Yes.
Yes.
Justin?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And Son, I think yes? Or yes?
Duh, yeah.
Okay.
And Rizzo's response is like, you realize you love a fucking toaster, right? Okay.
So here's the thing, though. He tries to kill her. There in the little Romulan meditation.
Yeah,
room,
in the worst James Bond villain type of way. Yeah, he tries to kill her. Sure.
Yes. So what's the deal with that?
I'm going to lock her in an easily escapable situation and assume everything went according to plan.
Exactly. You got it.
Well, I mean,
His plan or Rizzo's
he
plan?
didn't just leave. He did say that he was outside the room, so it wasn't completely James Bond in that fashion.
I can go get my Romulan disruptor. Boom! She's dead.
Yeah, no, really. Exactly.
It's almost like he meant her to activate.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad they didn't use anything like they were on radiation in this, and then they pull this stunt because, it wasn't just finished.
Well, I don't think they specified what type of radiation, and frankly, that's fine with me because the less Technobabble, the better.
Exactly.
In my,
It's
here's the thing about it. Maybe this
generator out here.
Well, here's a theory that it just occurred to me. Maybe this was just a red herring. Maybe there was nothing dangerous about it. He simply used it as a device to get her to activate and to do exactly what she did because that's what they were trying to do.
Well, that's not true.
Okay.
he needed the plausible. No, they never wanted her to activate.
Well, okay.
This gives him plausible deniability with regards to Rizzo.
Well, no, that's not true because it did hurt her. It started to immobilize her, and that's why she started backing away from it.
All right.
Yeah, no, I think definitely it was a way for him to save her without saving her. Forcing her to save herself.
Not sure if it was a red herring, but it sure was red radiation. No!
It was super red. Whoa!
We did.
I'm calling it
though.
duotronic ion radiation.
Duotronic? Seriously?
Really?
Hey, it's just what came up on the Babel generator, all right?
The Babel generator. Okay. Duotronic would make no sense with that, but because that's
it's two types of Thaleron radiation.
Yes, just call it red Thaleron.
We need to refrigerate the thingamajob-a-doodle-doo.
Okay, so we'll come back and talk about Sophie and Narek a little more. I want to
Sophie.
Say Sophie. Soji. Sorry. Thank you. I want to talk. Spend some time talking about Picard himself, because a lot of different sort of stuff happens with him and in his relationships with some of the other people on the crew and off the crew, for that matter, in this episode. So first of all, he's got his own issues around having been a Borg, and as we learned last week, he's still wrestling with the issue of recapturing his full humanity, and now he has to go back onto a Borg vessel for the first time in 30 years, and it's almost debilitating for him. Did that scene work for you guys? Like when he got, he transported in, and then like he walked onto that little bridge thing that reminded me of the inside of the Death Star.
Thank you.
Wondering, where's the railing?
Where's the railing? I know. It's where's the railing?
You stole my joke because that's the only thing I could think of, and it worked for me. It worked for me because it was the whole scene was so disorienting that I felt like I was with Picard, and then I was just waiting for him to fall in. Like it got you into the scene, so it worked. And it's like I was just, like you said, waiting for him to fall. No fucking rails. Holy shit.
And then you find out that he's saved by, guess what? Ex-Borg.
Yeah.
But he also is What's that, Travis?
I was just going to say, I like how they straight up say, they don't want you to fall.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a really interesting way of putting it.
They don't want you to fall because you won't get up.
Oh, you went there.
I did.
Oh.
See,
it's a good thing you're a dad, because that was a dad joke.
Joe, where's Joe Diaz to rate that for me? Where is
I know. We'll have to run that past him and get a rating.
There's a weird...
Did you see Justin? He just went...
There's
Justin's rating. Go ahead, son.
Bit of melding of the PTSD and what's actually going on in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because at one point, when we're sort of seeing through Picard's eyes that a drone wakes up. Even though the two people who are handling Picard, trying to keep him from falling, are ex-Borg. They don't have the implants removed.
Right.
And the one that wakes up in that vision just before that does have those implants.
Right. And do you think that was a vision, or do you think that was actually an unactivated Borg on the vessel, on the artifact?
I'm considering where they were, that most of that was ex-Borg. I doubt that they would have had an asleep Borg there.
What do the rest of you guys think? Was that a real Borg or just a vision?
I would say that's definitely real because, after Picard is, saved by the XBs and Hugh and him start talking, there are shots outside that do have more Borg. And you could see specific Borg in certain alcoves. It's just in the environment. It's like, okay, so there's Borg there, whether or not they've been.
And it wasn't like next to him. It was like, I think Justin's showing the footage now. It was like down at several levels, if not more. And it's almost like his being back woke him up, it's something.
It could have gone either way. It seemed to me like he was combining flashbacks with reality throughout that whole scene. And it starts from the moment that he's going through that visual archive where, you know, he's got his face and you see it from the other side of the holographic display, and it merges.
It's superimposed,
on
nice
Locutus. I liked it. That was pretty cool. But there was a lot of that going on. But my favorite part of that whole scene was the reunion of Hugh and Picard. It was so touching. Yeah. It was so sweet.
It really was touching.
Yeah, man. I knew that unless they were just going to totally be dicks to us with the writing, I knew that's how that was going to play out. It was really nice to see.
It was nice that they didn't overly complicate it. That it
right, exactly.
Really,
yep.
It was really just touching and sentimental. Yeah, son.
Yep.
I have a question. Was Hugh's heterochromia this noticeable in the last couple of scenes he was in?
His what?
Heterochromia.
His eye.
He has one bright blue eye and then one like brown eye.
I think it was more because of just the lighting of the scene. I think is what it was. It was different lighting.
That's a good question. Totally didn't notice that.
No, I did. She's right. I noticed
because
it too.
Throughout this entire episode, he has one bright blue eye and one kind of brown eye.
Yeah, he has had it before, but it hasn't been as pronounced as it was in that scene.
My theory on that is that one of his eyes might be cybernetic like Jordan, because I just watched Borg today. And in that episode, like, he had, like, half of his face was covered up. And I mean, if what we're going by, let me try that again. If what we've seen of other Borg is very much the same with Hugh, in the matter of, like, he may have just completely lost an eye when he was assimilated. He might just have.
Guys, be right back.
Maybe it's just a theory.
Did you know, one of the things I wondered about in this is we've seen X-Borg before, you know, who've in Voyager mostly, but a few other places as well, where they didn't seem as damaged as the XBs that we see on the artifact. Any theories about that?
Well,
more money.
a lot of the XBs that we see in Voyager, namely the ones from the cooperative, or who become the cooperative, were former Borg that removed their implants themselves, so they kind of knew how they were installed. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but it's still, you're seeing a significant difference. Like even Hugh, some of the scars are like intense, but XBs even more so. And I'm just wondering, well, I mean, who else has a theory? Justin?
The Romulans aren't that advanced medically, so I mean, they wouldn't probably not that advanced medically, I would think. I could probably explain a lot.
I'm sorry, what was the question now? Because I just came back.
We're at looking for possible theories for why the Borg we see on the artifact looks so incredibly damaged.
Because they don't give a shit. The Romulans don't give a shit. They'll extract what they need from them, the technology, and you know, to throw a bone to the Federation types that are there working with them, they'll keep them alive.
But
and they'll let them live and let them work, but they don't give a shit enough to make them whole again.
But that's the weird thing to me. The one thing that probably wouldn't be so what's the word, as conspiratorially thought of, would be the advanced medical tech of the Federation for regeneration and stuff like that.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. It's not the Federation that's doing it. It's the Romulans that's doing it.
Except it is the Federation. The Federation is allowed to be there. Wouldn't the Federation?
Right, but we don't know the extent of their actual reclamation part. So
I continue to look at this from the same perspective as the way the Federation and Starfleet came in to administrate Deep Space Nine. As the way they've come in to help with this the artifact, in that the Romulan Empire is in such a disarray, they really don't have the manpower, the resources to do this. So Federation agrees under these circumstances. And these
Except the Federation is not in control here.
they're not in control. They're at the end of the day, the Federation wasn't in control.
Not in control.
Well, I mean, but it still was Bajoran at the end of the day, and the Bajorans. This actually did happen. The Bajorans actually in the second season they actually kicked the Federation out of the.
Yes, that's true. But the terms of their presence there was that they're in command of the station. Unless blew out by the Bajorans. So, similar to like the naval bases in the Philippines, which are still part of the Philippines, but under treaty, they were completely, autonomously run by the Navy. So, unless the Philippines booted them out, which they did eventually, so that's kind of how
you're looking at you're looking at this at like it's more the like D-7 is more like an Air Force base is what you're in the perspective.
I'd say more like a naval base. But
DS9 said it itself. It is a Bajoran-owned station administrated by the Federation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Whereas this is Romulan-owned and Romulan-administrated, but with technical assistance or technical partnership with the Federation.
No.
There's a treaty, son. There's a treaty that stipulates how these people are working with each other.
The reclamation of the XBs is the only thing administered by the Federation. Hence Hugh's presence.
Yes, Hugh does mention that. But that's a sub program within the larger artifact, right?
My theory is
it's not, because
way more on the thing.
When they're talking about the scientists, the Federation scientists being there, every single Federation scientist is part of the reclamation unit, not anything else.
We don't know that.
Because Soji and Narek talk about that, like when Soji is showing up, or when Narek shows up.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically talk about that.
That all the scientists that are there are only working on the reclamation project? I don't think so. I don't remember that.
Because that was the what the hell is that? The initiation speech that one Romulan dude gave.
Right.
Because they would be reclaiming Borg from different sectors.
I don't know. We'll have to check on that, because
I'm just surprised
my sense was that
Quark didn't open a bar there. I mean, that's a perfect place for him to set up shop.
Are you kidding? That's about as dank a place as you can imagine.
But look where he was. I mean, he had a bar on Terok Nor. They were killing Bajorans on the promenade there.
Now he's going on Free Cloud.
Hence the need for lots of drinking. Travis, you were going to say something, your theory?
My theories on why some Borg look, rougher than others is pretty simple, honestly. I have two. One is maybe they're just not far along in their therapy as far as recovery and rehabilitation is concerned. The other is maybe that's just their skin. There's more than humans in the collective.
My one of the thoughts I had about that was that because of how this cube was separated from the collective cut it off. It was the one that did the cutting off. Whereas I think, unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, the other X-Borg that we've seen, they're the ones who took the affirmative step of cutting themselves off from the collective. So that, maybe that there's some kind of damage that comes as a result of having been, cut off directly by the collective itself, as opposed to, accidentally or purposefully sort of detaching yourself from that.
This is some rabbit hole shit here. Wow, this is really going down
yeah,
that rabbit hole.
We have to speculate too much on that, but I think Sun's question about like really who's in charge of what at the artifact and how much of what's going on at the artifact is just the scavenging of the Borg tech and how much of it is the reclamation project, because it's not clear to me which of the two is the bigger operation. And
I kind of wish they would explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really been critical of the lack of exposition on a lot of things in this show, because I expect it to just come naturally. But this would be kind of a good thing for the audience to know.
It depends on how it plays into the bigger picture. Because if it's not part of the bigger picture, I don't think you'll ever get an explanation for it.
If it's not part of the bigger picture, it means Carlos's prediction is wrong.
No, because my thing is not about the artifact. It's about the origin of the Borg, so it wouldn't change.
We'll find out more next episode.
Yeah, we're going to see more happen for sure, and maybe learn more about really how much the Romulans are in command of it versus the Federation.
I'll get to that when we get to the Smackdown.
Okay.
Speaking of, I have a new conspiracy theory for a prediction, so there you go.
Oh, okay. Looking forward to it.
Forward to hearing it.
It's like conspiracy.
So one thing I thought was interesting, and I read one review of the episode that had a listing of their favorite things in the episode, and this is one that stood out in my mind when I watched it too, was that one Borg or ex-Borg who went, "Locutus?"
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
I knew.
It's our Jesus figure.
I'm just wondering, is that a throwaway Easter egg, or do you think that has bigger implications coming up?
Well, it was meant to be a bigger implication. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a big implication further down the line. It was supposed to be an impactful implication right then and there with Picard.
So it's a one-off.
Even some ex-Bs still consider him Locutus and sort of a messiah character.
Well, I'll tell you one thing it does. It establishes a time frame for how long those Borg were on that cube. They were at least there back to the Battle of Wolf 349. They were at least
5-9.
Did I say 349?
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Oh,
just like
God.
I said, Sophie.
It's like it was in my brain right, but it came off my lips wrong type thing.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, Wolf 359. So we know they were there at least until before that, I would assume, because why would they have any need to recognize Locutus after that? I guess it could, but I mean, it would seem to me that it does kind of give us a bit of a timeline here.
Well, even if they were there after that, Locutus's memory would still be in the collective, if you remember.
Right, but how relevant? Yeah, I get that, but and that's very true. And that's
He's saying if they were cut off too early, they wouldn't know Locutus. Now we know that they were cut off after Wolf 359.
Right.
That's my point. Exactly. Right. But I think what Justin's saying here is that, well, if they were part of the collective, even if it was before the time, they would still know about. I think that's what he's saying. Never mind. Okay.
I don't understand that.
I don't. I think I just talked myself into a circle there. Never mind.
I think you started off just fine and then went off somewhere. I have no idea.
I'm sorry with it.
Get your medicine. Daddy needs his medicine.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I think if nothing else, it does establish that. So we have a time frame on when that cube was assimilated. So
right. Well, but yeah, very rough.
Yeah, rough.
Post Wolf 359 is a lot of a lot of space.
But it wasn't 100 150 years ago either.
Sure. Okay,
well,
so go ahead.
It was a lot. Well, whatever happened, that cube happened after the race that had the transporter got assimilated. I mean, that was after.
Oh yeah,
Voyager.
so that's after Voyager. That's after Voyager.
That got installed afterwards, and that cube got delinked from the collective then. So,
which, by the way, if that was in fact assimilated by the time of Voyager, anyone else think that the Queen that we saw in Voyager's finale Endgame escaped using that technology?
Oh, yeah.
Possibly, but here's the thing about this. I've never really thought of the Queen as really mattering where she is. She can just make herself appear anywhere. She's in the Matrix, as it were.
Well, except that this directly contradicts that, or at least makes it easy. Maybe there's a transition period if you have to, do it through their unimatrix as opposed to her physically transporting to a different spot. Because if what you're saying is true, then why install that transportation technology? And it was meant for her to escape.
Well, I have a theory on that. So they can travel 40,000 light years at a time, so they can figure that technology out, because that's kind of what they do.
Well, they are able to move almost anywhere in the galaxy, but they have to use the cubes to do it. So this is more like
but 40,000 light years.
Dude, they meant from the Delta Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant in almost no time when they attacked the Federation.
Well, right. But I mean, see, there's a lot more questions than answers with the Borg. They established that they've known about the Borg for years and years and years, yet they never made contact. The Borg were, they talk about the Borg being so far away at X point.
Who's they?
People.
There's lots of different people, Shawn.
Different characters in the show. I mean, look, they had the Raven tracking it way out where,
that's true.
I mean, so it's like I think 40,000 light years at a time is kind of a big jump. That's half the distance between, Earth and where the caretaker array was. So, I mean, I think 40,000 is probably.
But the point here is that this is an escape procedure for the Queen, just for the Queen.
So that's right, because that's where it was. It was in the Queen's.
It was in the Queen's throne room or whatever they call it.
Right.
Queen's cell.
Queen's cell. Was that what it was called?
All right, I'm sold.
Okay, you're sold.
Wait. Does this mean? Okay, this is gonna sound really, really weird, and I know you guys are gonna hate me for this, but does this mean Annika, by the time we saw her in Voyager, was still technically a teenager?
No, because they told us, I think they established her age at 28 on Voyager.
Right, but you have to remember, Borg, especially young Borg, are maturated quickly.
But that's when they're like little baby Borg. She was assimilated. So
she was assimilated as a child.
As an 8-year-old, she didn't. I mean, I've never. Let me put it this way: I've never seen anything to suggest that when they assimilate like that, because look at all these other ones that they had. They had all those other Borg kids that were not,
right. They woke up from their maturation chambers.
They were in maturation chambers too?
Yes, they were.
Okay,
well, she wasn't that we know of.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as they grow, they're always like upgrading them with different parts and stuff, because we've seen that happen. And that's undoubtedly what happened to Annika Hansen as she physically matured.
Hey, Justin. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
Go ahead. No, I was done.
Hey, Justin, do me a favor. While you're trying to track down going to the episode Dark Frontier on Voyager. That's the Raven episode, the flashback episode. It's a 2-parter. Go through the wiki on that and figure out the year on that it's supposed to take place in, so we can get an idea of how old Seven was. Because now I'm curious.
I told you.
Okay, well,
hate me.
I mean, she was clearly not a teenager, so.
No, I mean like her actual physical age,
as opposed to her what she looked. Right.
That because that would mean a whole bunch of fan wankers like.
I'm nearly positive they mentioned Seven's age as being 28. I didn't just pull that out of thin air. I think that I'm almost positive that was mentioned on the show.
Because I mean, at that point. I mean, you had Voyager who was stuck in the Delta Quadrant for 4 years at that point, right? and it was the second. Was it the second?
Well, without knowing when Raven is set, we can't really jump to that. Plus, I don't want to go down that road because that's about Voyager instead of Picard. So let's stick with Picard and come back and talk about some of the other Motley crew and what we learned about them or saw about them in this episode. So the first one on there is what I have titled Rios and Girardi sitting in a tree.
So mature.
What? I'm so sure.
Okay, wait a minute. Who all saw this coming? Show of hands. Show of
What's
hands.
that?
Who saw this
yeah,
coming?
I mean,
Show of
yes.
hands.
In fact, I think we talked about that last week.
The glances.
Yeah. How many of you expected Rios to back off though, like he ultimately did?
Not even a little bit.
I didn't expect that.
He was like, "I'll hit it." Okay.
Again, we're getting a Rios that's really more like Wolverine, and this is Rogue kissing Wolverine.
This was a moment that none of us in my watch party saw coming. As soon as Girardi and Rios kissed, my roommate John was actually verbally said, "What?" And I was
Like
like,
you didn't see it coming?
Really?
What?
She basically has been flirting with him for at least 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
I mean,
but this is also the woman who was.
there, but I thought I do believe that it just went a little too quick. I mean, granted, Star Trek romance has never been perfect, and it's been kind of fast-paced in the past as well. But
Well,
just-
when you kill someone you love, that puts you in this kind of weird psychological state that makes you more open
Fair
to,
enough.
I guess, getting
Fair enough.
sympathy.
Fair enough.
So I think
Except
that's
she
it.
was. Except your point is that she was in that state before she actually killed him.
Well, she was flirting with him before she killed him, but killing him made her, upset enough that she would go further than flirting.
She needed. All I kept thinking was, boy, she didn't waste any time whatsoever, did she? God. I mean,
Well, and how about that? She's obviously gotten away with killing Maddox. We have
For the moment.
For the moment, yes, but at this point, she has gotten away with it. There's a whole scene in which she sort of explains what happened. In my mind, that's a setup to her being found out eventually, because obviously there's going to be some sort of contradiction that happens. Is that the way you guys saw that scene?
Logs or something.
The way it was set up, it seemed more that they were obsessed with getting to the artifact first, more than making sure that the cyberneticist, being the only doctor in the room when they have a perfectly good EMH not showing up, was a thing that happened.
Yeah, that definitely was a
that
problem
so much.
that they had in this. Let's take a swing into Elnor territory, which I know will make Travis happy. Elnor has actually some really key lines in this episode, in which we actually see, I mean, at first, they kind of place some of these lines for comedy. Obviously, am I in-butting? Should I out-butt? Those were hilarious. But also, where we see him in his style of absolute candor sort of explain what he's seeing. Like, I forget who it was between, when he says something like, the tension between you two is making things here very awkward. And everyone looks at everyone else.
True that he was saying that too, because like most of the people were on the bridge when he said that.
Yeah. Anyway, so we get a little bit more Elnor on here. They're still playing him sort of for laughs, but how do we think that is developing him as a character in the show? Travis, you get to start since you watched him as almost.
Yes, I do. I think the show is developing him fantastic. I mean, like, yes, the comic relief is cute. I very much appreciate, he is very much the fish out of water because this guy's been in seclusion his entire life. He is very socially awkward when compared to anybody else around him because no one else filters I mean, like, Hugh doesn't filter his thoughts. Everyone else probably takes a moment to say, is this the proper thing to say at the moment? This guy, I'm going to say this regardless of whether or not people like it. And I think it's fantastic that way. And he's absolutely adorable when he gets around. Like, he has this puppy dog face when he says this kind of cute stuff. And then he comes out of nowhere and slices somebody's head off. And you're like, oh, yeah, this guy can kill people. That's right. And you were just touching about how he has some of these lines. Like, I was not only editing Memory Alpha, including some of his little memorable quotes here, I was also going over to TV tropes and adding in some stuff on this thing. This guy is full of just one-liners that just kick ass. Like, they just kick ass. And
he's like an assassin version of Gary Coleman.
Oh my God.
He's got this childlike wonder all the time, and then he cuts people's heads off.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what he reminds me of. This is because he's so very stoic a lot. It's kind of like, he reminds me of what would happen if we saw Worf as a teenager. That's kind of what Elnor is. Because Worf has some really good comedy throughout the franchise. That's
Captain, I must protest. I am not a married man.
Right? You know, definitely really aggressive tendencies. You know, what's that?
I would say his humor is very hit and miss. He has his moments, but then there's moments like, I don't think it's appropriate to be naked, and I just want to like smack him.
But it's like I said, this is like him as a kid. I mean, like, not even realizing that he's being funny, type thing. But at the end of the day, he's still this kick-ass warrior. I mean, I'm not making a complete analogy here. It's just it just gives me that kind of feeling to it. You know, it's like and I remember one of my favorite lines from Worf is that when he's talking about when he goes out to the Gamma Quadrant with Garrick, and he says, I must warn you, at the first sign of deception, I will kill him. And Cisco, and Cisco goes, I hope that's a joke. And he goes, we'll see. It's a great straight man Worf line that just lands perfectly. And it's kind of like, this is the kind of humor, like I said, if Worf was a teenager, this is the kind of humor he would deliver, you know, type thing. And it works. I like Elmore a lot. I'd like to see him more than a jokester and a killing machine. But we've only got 2 episodes really with him.
True, so, and in fact, we saw him making jokes and becoming a killing machine in this episode as well. And that's where the episode leaves off with his now signature line.
Yep.
My friends, please choose to live.
Right, exactly.
I think I like his line that he says before that just a bit better. When Hugh says, it's going to take a few minutes to shut this down and shut everything down and hide this room. Are you going to be able to hold him up for that long? And he's like, I won't need a few minutes. I was like,
oh, yeah, that was nice. That was nice. But not a signature line.
Not a signature line, but still.
Yeah, but no, it was a good one that talks, you know, that communicates a lot about his confidence in his own abilities. And so far, we see nothing to show that confidence is misplaced. But you know, in showing up the way that he did, anyone else have an issue with how was he able to transport in, but they couldn't transport them out? I have a theory about that, but who you noticed it, son? What do you think?
That was, it's like, okay, we're giving Picard these exact coordinates to beam onto the ship, and of course these are Romulans. They would know somebody else was beaming aboard. And yet, here's Elnor beaming aboard.
But they do know they're coming in, so there's no cover to blow because they already know this is happening. So
right,
I've got a theory. My theory is they probably could have beamed out, but the artifact has been shown to have a bunch of ships around. So probably the safest route would be, hey, let's get through this gateway that's could take us 40,000 light years away theoretically. They won't know exactly where we are. Hugh is covering their tracks, as opposed to, all right, let's beam back to beam back to La Serena and shoot our way out of this and figure out where to go from there.
I totally agree.
That's what I call the to what end theory.
Look, the trailer for the next episode shows exactly that happening.
Exactly.
Where that the La Serena is in a firefight with the Romulans from that cube. So that's the worst place. It's the last place that they want to go if they're trying to get Soji off that cube. Mm-hmm. So that makes total sense to me that they would use that Sicarian transporter device
technology.
Thing
Yeah, Justin, you were going to chime in. You said what you needed to say. Okay, cool. All right, so
I did. Did you guys
go ahead, son?
Did you guys notice that Chris had a siren tattoo?
What?
Who had what?
Rios.
Oh,
Chris
Rios
had a siren tattoo.
Oh, well, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does.
I'll have to look the next time I watch.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I sort of might glaze over on tattoos because I just don't like them very much. But I definitely saw he had tattoos. But yeah, we'll check that out. Which reminds me actually of something I noticed in that early scene where Narek is in bed with Soji. Did you notice that earpiece thing in his ear?
I did see that.
What the hell? What's up with that?
I figured it was just a just a headpiece that senior officials of the reclamation project might have.
In bed?
All right, maybe not in bed. I don't know. I
don't know either. I hadn't noticed that before. Did anyone else notice it in an earlier episode?
I didn't notice it before. No.
I didn't notice it until I rewatched it, and I was like, wait a minute. Like, it's very prominently there. It's in his right ear, I think. And it's it's like a black, it's a black earpiece. It's not small. So
maybe he's dead.
Maybe, but that would be like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, that's something that you should be able to repair biologically, not.
Well, look how it's Romulans. They're not really.
I don't think that explains enough. You're gonna have to do better.
Justin, pull it up. Can you pull that up?
You know what? Let's lean on Shawn's theory a bit. The sister's a voyeur, and she wanted to listen in.
Maybe, but wouldn't Soji be like? Isn't that a little obvious?
She wouldn't.
No,
please pay no attention to the bug in my ear.
Well, we got cameras every corner too.
With headphones on before, but that's probably just me tuning out my dad snoring in a hotel room more than anything.
While you're getting laid? What is going on?
No, not getting laid.
That's not what he said. Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Soji and what happens once she activates. One of the criticisms about Soji's character so far is that she's still kind of, we don't know anything about her. Like, she's a cipher. And even after, and maybe especially after activating, we know even less. It's clear she doesn't want to trust Picard, which is different from Daj, remember? Daj was like trained to want to program to trust Picard. That's not the case with Soji, which is an interesting difference.
That's because Mombot didn't say trust Picard. Soji is literally.
Well, this happened before Mombot, though.
Well, no, but here's the thing: Soji is literally finding out that her world is nothing that she thought it was,
right?
Mm-hmm. And in that, she is not confiding in Mombot, who says, "Go to Picard."
Yeah, that only happened after she activated, right?
Yeah, that was after she activated,
right?
Not before.
But Daj was freaking out.
No, Daj went to Picard before. It was
true.
after she activated. but before we saw her talk to Mombot.
Right, exactly.
I love that, by the way. That's her official name now on is Mombot.
But at this point,
I should add that on memory.
Soji has no connection to Picard because she's not on Earth at all. So if anything ever happens,
So she was never meant to
she was
come
never
across
meant
Picard.
to. And in all of this,
That makes sense.
she recognizes she is fighting against Mombot in a way. And she is realizing she's not who she is. Why the hell would she trust a dude who literally comes to her and says, I know who you are. Trust me. Trust me. After her trust has been betrayed in Narek, who just tried to kill her. Mombot, who keeps putting her to sleep.
It looks like the only reason she really does is because Hugh does. And she trusts Hugh, you know.
I would say that after Dodge activates in the first episode, it takes a moment before she gets that glimpse of Picard in her mind and realizes I'm safe with this person. In the heat of the moment with Soji, she may just not have had such a revelation yet. She might not have had a chance to get this revelation if she gets it.
But see, that's the thing. Dodge never had that revelation until she was watching the TV and saw Picard on it.
No, she was already on her way to Picard.
No, she wasn't.
Right after her boyfriend gets murdered, she's mourning over his body, and then there's a brief moment where there's a glimpse that she gets of Picard.
I don't think that's the case. I think I agree with Son on this. I think it happened the moment
she was on the run, and then there was all those TVs in the window, like it was in
1940s, and that it's right after her boyfriend gets murdered. She's mourning. There is a glimpse where she sees Picard. I know it.
In her head?
Yes.
We're going to have to look it up, and in between
right
the end of this and the beginning of recording the Smackdown, so that we can.
Well, Shawn's watching it.
It's the CBS All Access tone. Okay, so question. Let's jump back to some of the other Motley crew. I want to talk a little bit about
Viacom tone, honestly.
No, it's definitely CBS.
No. I said I missed the Viacom tone.
I don't even know that they had a tone. What was their tone?
Yeah, there was a when you saw like movies and TV shows, it was Viacom.
Yep, it was.
Oh wow, I totally don't remember.
Okay, Travis is right.
Yay! And Carlos also agreed with Travis.
Carlos is right. Charles and Travis are right. Immediately after the boyfriend gets killed, she has this vision of Picard.
Carlos +1, Travis +1. You both got this one correct.
Okay.
Photographic memory of mine sometimes works.
I don't have a photographic memory, so that's why I'm impressed that I remembered. Okay, let's jump back to talking about some of the other supporting characters, and the one I want to talk about right now is Rafi. So she's clearly messed up, like she's spinning out of control after being rejected by her son.
Mm-hmm.
They managed to get her to rally in order to force her way to. Oh, it wasn't a sweet talk.
She was high as fuck when she did it too, which is great.
Yeah, but it was interesting. Once she sort of clicked into the groove, she seemed like totally competent.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting. But there's you really get a sense of abiding sadness in her in the aftermath of her rejection by her son, and it's not just the obvious ways in terms of her drinking the booze and stuff, but also like when her friend Emmy at Starfleet she begrudgingly issues the diplomatic credential, she says, I want to tell you something as a friend, don't ever contact me again. And you can see this hurt in her face as like another bridge is burned. And so she is spinning out, and I'm wondering where this is going to lead her and us, and also why Picard seems really kind of not too upset about that. Like, he's sitting next to her and stuff, and he obviously, everyone can see she's a mess, but he doesn't say anything. What do you think is going on there?
This is the Picard hubris, honestly.
Ooh, say more.
Uh,
Was this the rampaging id she was talking about?
yes, basically. At this point, this is Picard's last hurrah. He doesn't really care one way or the other. He showed the initial care for Rafi, but yet at the same time, really?
I kind of think you're right, son. I would add one other dimension to that, and that's he's not an overly emotional guy. I mean, he was told by Sarek that he's more Vulcan than his own son, in the way he looks at the world, and I feel like he wants to say something helpful.
We lose Carlos.
Carlos escaping.
Oh no! Is he back?
Am I back?
You're back.
Stop
yes.
making a shake weight motion.
Okay, I'll be very still. So where did I leave off? He doesn't have the emotional tools to know what to do to help her or fix things, and maybe feels like Rios is in a better position to do that.
I doubt that. I seriously doubt that. He spent the last how many years with two Romulans who are very biting and very passionate that would have built some sort of emotional toolkit.
Oh,
it may not have been the best one.
I don't think so. There are plenty of people. Go ahead, Travis.
I was going to just say, like, I think I kind of agree with where Carlos is coming from with potentially not having the emotional tool set to properly show support. I personally saw it as soon as the call ends and he starts applauding and everyone else starts applauding and Rafi starts, drinking straight from the bottle. I thought two things. The first was I was thinking that maybe Rafi was feeling like she's just being used. Like maybe the people around her don't care as much as they say they do. They just want her because she's still got a few strings attached to the Federation and can still provide that kind of skill set. But I also potentially saw it as like Picard maybe trying to say like, hey, I understand that this is difficult for you. I want to show my support, but just not exactly showing it in the best way possible. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
I think that's part of it, and I think part of it is he's a captain. He's a commander. He delegates, and like there are people better able to help her at this point than he is. He knows she and Rios have a long-standing relationship, and he has to focus on this mission, and so that's what he's counting on to fill in something he probably couldn't do very well to begin with.
Oh my God, I have the best prediction for next episode now.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about one last thing about Elnor, which was which I forgot to point out earlier, which was his direct.
I told you to stay on the ship.
Yes, and he comes down. Thank you, Travis, for jumping in there as my brain stopped working for a minute.
That's the best quote of the episode.
And yet Picard didn't yell at him for killing people again.
Well, they're only Romulans. I'm kidding. I kid.
Romulan.
Picard's okay with murder when it serves his purposes. He's now fine with it. It's fine.
Maybe they're just sleeping.
Maybe.
Sleeping in their own green juice.
I did really like, though, that one. It was a quick moment. It was just a moment between him and Picard where Picard says, "I refuse to leave you behind once again." And he says, "It gladdens my heart to hear you say that. Now get out of here. I'm going to save your life."
Yes.
which I thought was a really great moment. And in fact, really counterbalances the comedy moments with Eleanor earlier, that when it comes down to brass tacks, he's there and he's all business.
Yes, and I also really like adding on to that, how he's like, I'm sworn to defend you, and Picard's like, well, then I release you from this pledge. He's like, no, I decline to be released. Like that.
Yeah.
That was an
That was a
awesome
nice moment. That was a nice moment. One of the things you may recall we talked about last week was sort of the whole Borg/synthetic connection, because one is fully artificial life and the other is kind of
biomechanical life.
Right. And I observed that last time, and I think we're seeing another explicit example of that in this episode when Jurati is talking to Picard, and she says the Borg are mandatory reading in my line of work. So clearly there is, at least as far as the show is concerned, there is a direct connection of some kind, technologically or biologically or whatever, between how the Borg exist and what these synthetics do. So I don't pretend to understand what that is, but they are making it really clear, I think, that that's what's happening.
Well, if you wanted to understand everything that Data was, you would want to read up on the Borg, wouldn't you?
Right. It makes sense to me.
The Borg would have the sum of thousands of collective worlds, literature, technology, and understanding, and just so happened to have a complete and utter scan of everything that Data was.
Well,
That's
more
true.
than well, I think,
and they desired Data. Remember,
right?
I desired him. She wanted him.
I think more than that is that, I mean, you really, if you're going to, study artificial life, I mean, wouldn't it only make sense that you would also study the Borg, the way the Borg function as well? I mean, no, it's not exactly the same thing, but there's a lot of similarities between the two,
Right.
Yeah, so we'll keep our ears to the ground on this one. Last thing about Jurati, anybody have any additional thoughts after this episode in terms of, is she truly evil, or is there something else going on that we just don't know yet? Has she actually betrayed Picard and the Motley Crew, or is she doing something else based on sort of her ethical
She deserves to die, yes.
Okay, so you're definitely on the betrayal part. Who else? Justin, what do you think?
I think she was coerced and she was manipulated to do this. That was going to come out, and that she was programmed.
I don't care. I don't care if she's manipulated or anything like that. She just deserves to die.
But she'll die in the process of this coming out.
Okay, here's my prediction. I know it's early. She does not die. She will live to see another day. That's just my feeling.
I'm with you on that. I'm very torn about this because before last episode, I was convinced that she had been mind melded and been basically Manchurian candidate over this. And after last episode, I got the feeling that she was shown something that just horrified her beyond belief, that she has to stop it. And so it's like, I'm not really sure which way they're going with this, whether she really was, she's been brainwashed, or she actually has seen something that's just too horrible to imagine. And she must
it really
stop
makes
at
me
all
wonder
costs.
what that was. Yeah, it really makes me wonder what that was. Travis, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think she's gonna die. As far as where her true allegiance lies, and whether she's working against Picard or she's just being manipulated, I hold to the hope that she's just being manipulated. I think Jurati's a cool character. Intriguing enough, and I'm
She's
interested.
sassy. That's what I like about her.
Yeah, she is very sassy. I laugh at lines like, "Oh, that's not a total buzzkill. I totally want to talk about the existence I can't remember exactly what she says to Rios in his book of exist.
Oh, the tragedy
Right.
of existence.
Tragic of life, and everything like
I
that.
totally want to talk about knowing I'm going to die.
Exactly, and I very much I believe that she is very passionate about her work. I believe she has she has the best interests in mind. I mean, she did talk with Commodore O, who likely dropped quite a few bombshells on her. I mean, she did say when she was killing Maddox, I really wish you knew what I know, or something.
and seen what I've seen.
Exactly. So there's something we don't know yet that I believe will come into play and further reveal to us exactly why she did what she did. But I do believe that she is not actively working against Picard or trying to sabotage him in that retrospect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Son, any last words on this topic?
Well, here's the thing. If she has seen these horrible things, in all likelihood, she's given up her career right then and there. She would have to. Her career in cybernetics has been this thing with Maddox for forever, and now she's been shown this horrible thing that she goes out of her way to kill Maddox. So this whole, what career does she have to go back to when this is all said and done?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you read the book, it actually goes into great detail of their relationship leading up to the show. It's actually quite informative. It gives a good backstory.
Okay, fair enough, but I don't.
All right, we'll have to take your word on that.
But it doesn't really have much to do with what Son's saying, and that is that, you know, I get what's her purpose at this point if it was that bad. You know,
my guess is, remember, they drop a little hint, Maddox does, in talking with her, when he talks about her contribution to the creation, presumably, of Doj and Soji, and she says that's yet another thing I have to
atone for.
Thank you. So I think there's something, she played some kind of role in there that maybe create some sense of personal responsibility for everything that's gone wrong. But I can't imagine what that is right now.
DNA?
What?
DNA?
Maybe, but they don't look anything like her.
Yeah, but that's not the no. Okay, so whatever her contribution is, it had to be more than just, she supplied. No, she was literally in love with Maddox. Like, they were step on step in a relationship.
True, but that by itself is not a contribution. That's just
no,
status.
They were literally both working in the exact same field. They would have been hand in hand in whatever process Maddox was
I agree.
Before the ban.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there, son. And in fact, I think more to the point, if all she did was contribute DNA, it's like that is not a very feminist way of looking at it. Just because, she's a scientist, a leading scientist, she was a colleague of Bruce Maddox, her contribution better damn well be something that she mentally thinks of rather than just, we just scrape some DNA out of her and put it in these things, because that totally sort of makes her all about her DNA, instead of her as a person. So I hope that's what we see, something along those lines. Okay, let's talk a little bit of the XBs. One of the things that Hugh and Picard talk about, we get a lot more detail about sort of we've been speculating of what's the status of these X-Borg. And Hugh shine some more light on that, talking about how essentially these Borg/ex-Borg were once enslaved to the collective and to the Queen, and now they're basically enslaved to the Romulans who are harvesting their technology, and they don't seem to have any rights, and they don't seem to have, they're not free to leave. So that's an issue. And he almost hints at, and the show hints at, one of the things that Picard needs to do is essentially become their advocate. It's yet another thing maybe he has to atone for. And I wonder if, and I hope personally, that that's one of the things he ends up taking on, is the cause of the ex-Borg.
This is another one of the real life parallels of Patrick Stewart.
Interesting.
Patrick Stewart runs two causes. His mother was abused by his father, and so Stewart champions domestic abuse survivors and awareness and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, his father was a war veteran and was diagnosed as shell shock, as it was. And it was always treated as when the father would get abusive and have those PTSD, what we now call PTSD episodes, he would take it out on his wife in front of Patrick. And what we now know, back then, the cops treated it as you must have done something wrong incident. So on the one hand, yes, he is championing the cause of domestic abuse, but on the other hand, he's also been championing this cause of treatment and treating soldiers and PTSD as victims, because they are, to an extent. Mm-hmm. And in much the same way, you're having these Borg being treated in much the same way. They're victims of the stuff that has happened to them, and they need a champion.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting perspective on that.
Yeah, I really like that. It may be one of the things that appealed to him when they came to him with the proposal to do this show. So I think that's a really good point. So Justin, +2 to index for that one. Okay. So let's talk about the title of the episode, The Impossible Box. Narek and Rizzo do we know her Romulan name, by the way?
No.
You just know her as Rizzo still?
Narita Rizzo is what we know her as.
Yeah. So they have a whole discussion about the box, and which is obviously a metaphor with what he's trying to do with Soji. But I thought a couple of lines that he said in that discussion were very revealing. One is he talks about the box not being a toy; it's a tool. It helps me think, and in this case, it also helps him figure out what to do, how to extract secrets from Soji, the closed box, just as he does with the toy/tool. So that was one thing. The other thing was, when he describes the whole cognitive dissonance thing as, a feature, not a bug, of her programming, a way for her to deal with the cognitive dissonance of, she should be able to figure out that she's not a real person, and yet she's not. And so that's being channeled, that dissonance being channeled into her dreams, and that as a way to sort of process that out of her consciousness. So he describes that as not a malfunction, but rather a vulnerability he intends to exploit. And finally, he says that playing with the box is essentially, it's not a waste of time. It's just taking the time to understand what's keeping it closed. That's the secret to opening it, is not trying to figure out how to open it, but instead doing the reverse, finding out what's keeping it closed. So how did that metaphor resonate for you guys as you saw it kind of play out through the episode and what we saw with Soji? And did you see any relevance with what we saw in the other subplots of the episode? Who wants to tackle that question?
she is just so Tal Shiar. Like
Sophie is? Sophie is? I keep saying Sophie's.
No, the
Rizzo?
sister. She is so utterly impatient about everything. It is so refreshing to see some kind of Tal Shiar agent that is like slow and methodical
And deliberative, yeah.
Like,
no, I think that's a really good point. We've never seen one like that.
Every other Romulan captain and all this kind of stuff, they just appear and they sit there and they listen and they plot in their head and then they make moves. And then you see the Tal Shiar, and the Tal Shiar are like, do this now, do this because we say so, do this, do it now, do it now. And you have that out of Rizzo, and here we have a Tal Shiar agent and her brother who's like, it's all cool, I'll figure it out.
Yeah,
We're making progress. That's because they're not Tal Shiar.
But I have to go back to Carlos's point. We've seen no other evidence that this Vashta Narada people.
Dot Vaj.
There you go. That they're even a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're assuming they're a thing, but they're not distinct from the Tal Shiar, Justin. They're part of the Tal Shiar. So they're Tal Shiar, who happen to also be part of this secret, deeper, darker.
But what if they're actually Section 31?
I don't think so.
Oh, right.
That was actually.
I will eat my hat.
That was actually. I would put this on the prediction board from. This was a prediction from Lore Reloaded, and I'd put it on the board just to see how it would pan out. And that was when we see in Voyager, we see Admiral Ross playing willingly with Section 31 to install a Federation operative into the Tal Shiar. Or not Voyager, it was Deep Space Nine, to put and because Bashir was involved in that plot. Now, what if that actually as far as we know, that plot succeeded? And what happened if the Federation fully infected the Tal Shiar and created this Zat Vash from a Romulan myth?
No, we know they're I see what you're saying. You're saying they're just a myth and they turned
right. It was a myth used by.
I think that's. I think getting one undercover agent, double agent, whatever,
because we
is not going to completely transform an entire.
Because we do have a bit of contradictory evidence from the Romulans about cybernetics, and that is Admiral Jarak talking about cyberneticists in the Romulan Empire.
Okay, I still think that's a terrible argument. And didn't Michael Chabon already address this? About that exact same thing. Didn't he already address this? And that, of course, why would there not be Romulans who specifically study the technology of other cultures to know how to defend against it? It's not a contradiction. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
There would be cyberneticists who are there for defensive purposes only.
Right. And I think cybernetics is distinct from the creation of artificial life forms.
Sure.
Because obviously the Romulans are pillaging Borg technology, which is cybernetics, on the artifact, and they don't seem to have a problem with that. It's going the next step, which is trying to create fully artificial or synthetic life where they draw the line. And so that's why that doesn't really hold much water for me, that kind of offhand reference
of course they're going to be, studying cybernetics. I mean, you're talking about a very paranoid and very secretive species, and they're watching everything. So they're going to want to know what the other side's doing, so they're going to want to study it. So yeah, they're going to have people in that field. That's perfectly logical.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of those things where it's something you expend the resources to know about, learn about, and employ, but you don't implement it in any real way in in the broader society.
But didn't what's her name literally say at the beginning of Picard that they didn't have any cybernetics research at all?
I don't remember, but I came away with that it was more about artificial life than. I mean, obviously they're related because I made that point earlier in this discussion, which the show is clearly showing there is some kind of overlap, but I think there's a difference between cybernetic parts which basically enhance a being's biological functions and I don't know what that was, but anyway.
Shawn, going back to episode 1.
Episode 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I just think that artificial life is like a quantum. There's a quantum difference between that and parts that enhance.
No, biology. I completely understand and I agree, which is why I also continue to question the board thing.
Here in the Federation, you refer to the Taos
Did you put that on mute, Shawn, while you look? Thanks.
It's a bit redundant. You could put the word secret in front of almost any.
Thanks. Okay, so
right.
I thought I had muted it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So here's the thing that also, this is sort of out of left field, but I made a note of it in my notes here. You remember in the last episode, we made took notice about that little bit of Voyager theme that showed up as Seven was beaming down to Free Cloud. Similarly, this episode features a very well-known theme, just as, if I recall correctly, it's right after Picard gets the diplomatic credentials and right before they leave or continue on in their voyage towards the artifact, and you hear the original series theme before we go to commercial. What do you think that means? Because that wasn't his show. Why that particular theme at this point? Any ideas?
Well, maybe I'm just looking at it surface level. I don't know if it means much of anything.
The music stingers so far in the show have all been very relevant. I mean, they've made a point. And I just don't get what the point of this one was. I don't think it's an accident. Somebody made a point of choosing to put that theme with that character at that dramatic moment in the episode. Everything you see is calculated in a TV episode, and so it's not an accident. Go ahead. What do you think, Travis?
Here's my take on it then. We had just finished watching Raffi and Emmy go back and forth, and Raffi tells her, like, we want to do this the proper way. We want to go to the artifact without any diplomatic incident. We want to do this proper. Diplomatic mission, official letter of credence. We don't want to be on the wrong end of a disruptor cannon, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so that, to me, might have just been like a subtle way of saying, like, look, we know that you guys are concerned about Star Trek losing its direction. It's still here. Like, the core value of Starfleet is still here. This may not be a Starfleet show, but these people still have.
Those complaints have only come since the series started, and all of this happened way before. It was all written in film before. Anybody in the broader public knew about it. What was going to happen at Picard?
I remember people asking at conventions before this show came out, and was there were people who were concerned because they didn't care for the tone of Discovery, and they're asking if it was going to be a similar tone to how it was in Picard. And I believe that the writers were well aware that people were probably going to take issue with the tone. And so I look at this scene as a way of saying, they still have Starfleet in them, despite the fact that they have their grievances with Starfleet. But
why that particular theme? You know,
Because,
why not a stinger from the TNG theme?
because you know that the original series is Starfleet in a lot of people's eyes. It's what started it all. So why
probably
not?
not most people's eyes, though. You know, a lot of the people who look at it that way are dead. You know, there's probably a lot more. There are a lot more fans who were, you know, raised on TNG than TOS. So I don't know. That doesn't sound very convincing to me. I think there's something else going on there.
I'm
Sean, what do
so
you think?
glad we're having this.
For the record,
Sean first, then Son.
She does say right out, we don't study cybernetics, but
Boom! Shakalaka.
But I don't think it's really relevant because I think in context they don't study cybernetics for the purpose of their own use, but they're certainly, again, I mean, you would always study the enemy's weapons. You know,
I think this is one of those famous, you know, just Star Trek incongruities. You know, when you're retconning something.
I mean, if you want to get
because the reality is, she's right. We have seen no real evidence of, you know, synthetic life or anything like we've seen in the Federation. We've never seen anything like that. To thank you, Justin. +2 to Index. We haven't seen anything more than what, you know, Laris described in that scene with Picard in previous. So, I mean, I think if anyone realized that reference from that one episode that you were talking about, Son, they probably just thought, you know what, the rest of what we see about the Romulans, you know, is consistent with what we're putting across here, and we're just going to let that one go, because they've done that many times with many things. So I wouldn't hang my hat too much on one.
Fair enough.
You know, I mean, I think it's definitely a mistake if you want to call it that, but I just don't think it's one that is going to end up being very significant if you're just going to ignore it the way they ignore lots of stuff, you know, for dramatic purposes. Shawn, were you going to finish up with something?
What was it? What were we?
The original thing we're talking about is the use of the TOS theme at the close of that scene.
I mean,
and it was it was a very sort of majestically orchestrated use of the theme. I mean, it was only, you know, a couple seconds long, but it was, you know, it's the one you think of. And so, you know, I'm just trying to figure out what the meaning behind it is. With 7 and the Voyager theme, perfectly obvious. Not so obvious here.
If we want to get technical, the original theme. Oh, sorry, Shawn.
Well, I was going to say, it's nice. How about that? We all like it.
No, guys, that's not how TV shows are written. You know, they don't do things because they're nice. Everything has a meaning. Everything has a purpose. And the purpose may not be totally very deep, but there is one. And I don't see a purpose of why that theme at that moment in this episode.
Okay, so
I remember it, but I don't remember exactly what the scene was.
It's right at the end of, right after they sign off with Emmy at Starfleet Command, who grants the diplomatic credential to Picard, and as they're about to take off to, you know, complete their trip to the artifact, Picard, like, you know, lays back in his chair, and the theme comes up, and then, you know, end scene.
It's just a successful win because they got the objective. They were able to clear the objective, just like, you know.
Okay. Got me on that one.
But why this theme? Like, why this theme? It's like the best known stinger in all of Star Trek music. Why is it used here?
Okay,
well,
it was. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
It's also the beginning of Next Generations too.
Exactly.
It's.
Been trying to say it. You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but it's, you know, that's maybe. I mean, you're right. It's not. It is the opening there, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like enough. It's not what we associate with Next Generation.
I wanted to stop in the middle of this and go, yeah. I would really like to, I very much enjoyed this therapy session, Carlos. I'm so glad you have admitted you are old and dead.
No, I'm a DS9 fan. more than a TOS jet.
Because
I am old
at this
for sure, but I'm not dead because I've moved on from TOS.
Well, I mean, this is the 99% of the complaints I'm seeing are, these useless complaints, as I like to call them, are from that era of Star Trek, not the TOS era. It's the B&B era. The God, what are we talking about? Nearly 600 episodes? No, more than that.
They're over 700.
700 episodes of that era. That their complaints are all based on the premise of this isn't the Star Trek from 20 years ago. This isn't the Star Trek from 30 years ago. It's not that this isn't the Star Trek from 50 years ago. It's the complaints are all based in it not being like it was during the Next Generation era. And when I say era,
we don't need to belabor the point. It just seems incongruous to me without there being some other meaning for its being employed here, because you have to go to a lot of trouble to say this is what we want here. I mean, typically with a score, you let the composer do what he or she wants to do, unless you give them some very specific instructions. And so clearly this must have been some kind of specific instruction. I'm just wondering to what end.
So I'm gonna
one there complaining about things real quick. Here's a little gift for them.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Son, go ahead.
I'm going to flip around the last little conversation we had about cybernetics not really meaning anything. Sometimes a musical stinger is just a cigar.
No, that's not how TV production works. Even the cybernetics not being meaningful thing, that was a conscious choice. Everything you see on screen is a conscious choice. That's why it costs so much money to do these things. It costs money to hire a composer. It costs money to write music. It costs money to to place it in an episode. It's not an accident.
Just to expand on what is going on here.
What are we doing?
What are we looking at?
Hold on.
Just to expand on what Carlos has said about how even the choices to include, not to include things, to ignore canon, things like that. Those are definitely conscious choices. Like I've said, I put this before. I have the 2 5-inch binders of the technical notes from Rick Sternbach about for Next Generation and Voyager, and where they have these conversations back and forth between the production people and the writers, and they talk about yes, we can do this, but no, we can't do this because in an episode 3 weeks ago we did this, or back in the original series this happened. And sometimes what will happen is very simply to say, okay, you know what? We know that it doesn't line up with canon. We don't care. It's going to make the story flow better, so we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So these are conscious choices that are made. I agree with Carl. These aren't mistakes.
Hopefully it's something we'll come to understand later. Maybe on my third or fourth week.
Those email and get them on the show for you.
Yeah. I mean, I love that answer better than they're just doing it to screw it up. It's like, no, it's because it makes the story make sense. That's why the Klingons have head riches. That's why, it makes it make sense. You just gotta go with it. Canon is just there as a backstory.
Yeah, I don't.
It's not an exacto.
I don't see where this is making sense. Like, what is it illuminating here?
Nothing.
Anyway, we don't need to belabor it. We'll see if it turns out to be something or not. I just haven't noticed anyone else, in any of the reviews or recaps or anything, sort of address this issue. But there you have it. So a couple final things before we sign off from this main show and then record our Picard Prediction Smackdown. Did you all feel like, as far as Picard himself was concerned, that they took a lot of time sort of playing up his fears and anxieties and about the Borg, having been a Borg, feeling the weight of responsibility. Like at first I remember thinking, Picard was a Borg for basically a hot minute. I mean, it's not like Seven, who was since she was 8 years old. It's not like Hugh. Like he was basically, it was 2 episodes.
All right, this is how I'd respond to that. Someone getting sexually assaulted is probably only getting sexually assaulted for a few minutes.
Good point.
But it stays with them.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
it would be
involved it too.
No, seriously though.
And look at what.
Whoa, folks, one at a time.
Okay,
Son,
trauma
then Shawn,
is trauma, regardless of how long it lasts. Trauma is traumatic experience is a traumatic experience, and not for nothing. But once you're in the collective, you're in the collective. I mean, it's so that you can't unring that bell, even if you separate yourself from the collective.
Agreed.
So,
but don't you think it's reasonable to consider that? I mean, the amount of time and the effect that has on the psychology of the person, it
I don't necessarily
has an impact.
I don't necessarily think so, and not for nothing, but they didn't. Picard just wasn't a drone. Picard was. He was almost a hybrid. That's what they wanted him.
Okay, good point.
While his body was doing all this, right, as he explained it, he it's like he wasn't he was an active participant, but he wasn't at the same time.
Yeah,
and he had no control.
So, yeah, that's a very good point.
Contact, they also explained that he was pretty much the Queen's lover, more or less. I mean, because he rejected
I couldn't understand the thing you said.
In First Contact, pretty much explained that he was the Queen's significant other. That I mean, more or less, it was
sort of
him
hinted
or
at that,
Data.
but I don't think that's that relevant. I think as I was thinking about possible reasons for this, I think springboarding off of your observation, Shawn, which I think is really important, the idea that he, as Locutus, the interface between humans or the Federation and the Borg, was more aware of his actions and the repercussions, and it was very deeply drawing on his personal knowledge of Starfleet and the Federation. And I think that where the trauma for him comes from is not simply having been assimilated, but the fact that he participated in this slaughter,
right?
At Wolf 359 and elsewhere possibly, and that leaves very deep scars in him, in addition to having remely been assimilated.
Right. I'll give you a prime, just a metaphor for this. Remember in Best of Both Worlds 1 that while he's through the process of assimilation, he's got that single tear.
Yep, the single tear. I was thinking that too. Yeah, good point. Okay, let's wrap up with some ratings. I do want to mention
one thing. I'm so mad that Ross is not here. Ross, get over being sick, you bastard.
Yeah, one of the things he was going to talk about was
this is another correlation to the Rihansu novels, in that it mentions the Romulans have a name that they share with the world, a name that they share with their family, and then their true name.
I was so happy they did that.
Yeah, no, I think the Rihansu novels are a great source of ideas for how we're treating the Romulans in this show. So I'm totally with you on liking that.
They did say they did source some of the recent novels for background for this, so I'm really
clearly
happy
they did.
They did.
Yeah,
really
clearly
happy.
they did.
So yes, they're partially canonizing some of the novels.
Yes, and I think if it's a good novel, I'm all for it.
Please don't the Shatner stuff.
Yeah, none of the Shatner stuff. But the Rihansu stuff, that's is that Diane Carey who wrote that? Is that her?
I think it was.
Anyway, they were excellent. Okay, so let's do our ratings for the show. 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. Travis, start us off.
I'll go ahead and give this one a solid 9.
Solid 9, okay. And index/Sun Seal?
8.5.
8.5.
Hi,
okay, we're in the same neighborhood. And Justin? A full 9. Okay. And Shawn,
I
where
give
do
an
you
8.
land on this one? An 8?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to probably go with an 8 as well. I think overall it was a very strong episode, and it certainly did a good job of breaking us out of some of potentially ultimately boring storylines, namely all the stuff that was happening or not happening, as the case may be, on the artifact between Narek and his sister and Soji. So I think it did a good job of like really upending things, shaking things up as we now move to a whole different setting for presumably the rest of the season. So any other last thoughts anyone wants to share on this episode, Shawn?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. It's still bugging me now that I'm really kind of sad about the Sakarans that they got assimilated.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's like
R.I.P. Sakarans.
Well, we're
mean-
not sure if the entire race has been assimilated because their
Oh.
technology was widespread because they were able to teleport to worlds thousands of light years away.
Well, I don't know.
That's a good point.
I mean,
The Elorians were destroyed, but we still see plenty of Elorians.
Well, they said, I mean, didn't they come around and say that they assimilated the Sicarians?
Yeah, but, assimilating the planets and whatever doesn't mean that there weren't people who were able to escape. I mean, just like the Elorians. But we'll chalk that down to Sun feeling optimistic and bright. So for you, Shawn. I mean, Sun.
Before we do go, like Shawn said, you can't unring that bell, but you also should like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, and please do. Any other final thoughts on the episode before we wrap up for the main show?
Elmer out of 10.
Okay, great. Then I'll finish with a couple of program notes to remind people that we are now doing our Picard Prediction Smackdown as a separate, much shorter installment each week. So if you want to hear the Smackdown, listen to the separate thing that will be released, I think, at the same time, right, Justin? Yeah, same time, but it'll be separate, labeled separately, so you can go right to it if that's prefer. Next program note, of course, is we've got the upcoming episode for next week called Nepenthe. I think it was called.
It's called Narura Nepenthe.
It's not Narura Nepenthe. It's just
Narura Nepenthe. That's my story. I'm
folks
sticking
at
to
home,
it.
ignore everything he just said. I'm wondering if that's the name of the planet where Riker and...
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. So it's a significant planet, but it's got to be significant in ways that is just more than just Riker and Troy, because they titled the episode that. So
well, I mean, we do see a planet getting blown up in the trailer, so.
Oh, good point. Good point. Okay, so we'll see what happens on that.
Spoiler alert about Nepenthe. Nepenthe is a drug described in Homer's Odyssey as banishing grief or trouble from a person's mind.
Ooh, thank you. I meant to do that before the show. And it's interesting because, of course, La Sirena is a reference also to the Odyssey, which is the sirens and the way they lured sailors to their deaths. Hopefully we're not luring the Motley crew to its deaths, but
Rios was, except that the thing that kind of correlation is that the La Sirena called Rios back into space.
Oh, maybe. I like, you are on an optimistic streak this week, son. Very refreshing.
Yeah, 8.5 and everything, but higher than us. Yep.
Yeah, really.
What's the point of being contradictory if I can't contradict myself from time to time?
You are large and contain multitudes.
Nepenthe also mentioned in The Raven, too, by Edgar Allan Poe. There you go.
Nevermore. Quote the Raven. All right, that is it for this show. We will see you all next week when we weigh in on Nepenthe. And until then, you can join us on our regular podcast, The Real Super Geeks, which will be released on Monday. Yes, Justin? We'll be recording it on Sunday night. We'll release it on Monday. So please tune in for that. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Remember, I'm always indexing.
Yes, you are.